Welcome back to another episode of Designer versus DIY, where I create DIY versions of the Disney Parks designer ears and then also sometimes the Minnie Mouse main attraction ears. Today's DIY is for the latest designer ears, which are the Her Universe Ahsoka Tano ears. These ears were released on May the 4th, in addition to a whole bunch of other Star Wars merchandise, and these ears appear to be extremely popular. They were kind of the standard price for the designer ears, which was like $78, and as I've said, in my opinion, that's just too much for what these ears are. I'd say you could get away with $50 to $55 retail for what these ears really were, but apparently people didn't mind paying that price because later that day, when everything was sold out, I went on eBay and these ears were reselling for up to $400. So many listings, all centered around $400, even ones that had bids on them. I was like, what in the world is going on? And I also thought to myself, well, I could probably DIY those ears for about $5. And I was pretty spot on with that. It cost me about like $7 or $8. I had everything on hand I needed to make these ears minus the orange fabric. So I tried to use as many existing things that I had here as I could, and I am so happy with how these ears turned out. Here's a little bit of a closer look at these ears. The actual ears themselves and also the bow are hand painted, but if you have a Cricut, you could also make a really nice finished product. This little headpiece here is just out of craft foam. I've even made my own faux looking gem there. And then the back of the ears are also fully painted. And they're made using my standard ear method, so they're sewn onto the headband. To be totally honest, I don't really know who the character is that these ears are based on. I mean, I know it's Ahsoka Tano and I know she's from Clone Wars, but I've never seen any of that. But what I'm getting is there doesn't seem to be a lot of merch related to her, but people really like the character, so they're very excited when merch does come out. So now if you'd like, you can create your own DIY version of these Ahsoka Tano Her Universe Disney Parks designer ears. I'm using my standard 1-inch plastic headband, and I'm covering it in this minky brown fabric by gluing it onto the headband. The key here is to make a template that is a 1/2 inch wider than the headband on each side, tapering down towards the ends. I then have this black braid trim which will line the inside of the headband. And now we have a great headband base to start with. For the ears, I'm using this white cotton fabric. You want a white fabric that will be easy to paint on. Because that fabric is pretty thin, I'm lining it with this thicker flannel fabric. I cut out 4 pieces of my white cotton and 4 pieces of my flannel. Sandwich them together so you have a piece of flannel, 2 pieces of cotton right sides together, and then another piece of flannel. I use an 11 centimeter diameter circle as a template for my ears, tracing that onto the fabric. I have a 10 centimeter circle with an arc at the bottom to mark where the opening of the ear will be. Now sew along the ear using the marks as a guide for where to start and stop sewing. Once your ears are sewn, cut off the excess fabric, leaving a bit extra at the open base. Then turn the ears right sides out. As I do for all my ears, I'm using this household firm foam from Joann's as inner structure and support for the ears. Using the 10 centimeter diameter circle with an arc at the base, cut out 2 pieces from the foam. Taco fold and insert the foam into the ears. Next, use Fiberfill to stuff the ears to desired puffiness, adding stuffing on both sides of the foam. I sew the base of the ears closed. Fold over and fold in the fabric, then whip stitch closed. With the second ear done, we're ready to sew them onto the headband. I've marked the center of the headband, and I've marked 4 centimeters down on both sides for where to attach the ears. Then you can sew the ear onto the headband, stitching into the ear, then the headband, sewing all the way around twice. The base ears are now assembled. To decorate, I'm using soft matte white fabric paint and essentially painting a coat of primer on the ears to create a nice base to work off. You can tape off the headband to be sure you don't get fabric paint on it, but I'm just trying to paint carefully. Make sure this paint fully dries. I have an image of the ears for reference because I'm going to freehand draw on the design, beginning with the back. If you don't feel comfortable freehanding, you can print out an image of the ears and use the design as a stencil. I'm starting with the back because this design covers the full height of the ears and will be easier to begin with. I mimicked the design as best I could on the other ear. To paint them, I'm adding some fabric paint medium to this blue acrylic paint. Now is what I find to be the really fun part and painting the design on the ears. This is the type of precise kind of painting work that I really like to do. One coat gives a decent start, but add a few more coats until you have a nice good full coverage. We're moving on to making the headpiece using this very thin craft foam. I only have black on hand, so I painted it brown, but they do sell this in brown. I printed out a photo of the ears and cut out the headpiece to use it as a template. Trace it onto the foam and cut it out. I'm going to cut out separate pieces of the template to mark out the lighter tan segments. I have this white paint marker which will also help prime the surface. After, I painted these segments a light tan, but my phone unfortunately ran out of storage when I was trying to film it. To make the gem, I'm using this silver metallic paint to paint a bit of the craft foam. Then I'm going to cut out a piece using this template for the gem. To give it dimension, I'm adding some Crayola Model Magic Glaze, which is going to act as a quality light resin, giving it dimension and shine. Once it is fully dried and set, glue it onto the headpiece using E6000 glue. Finally, we're moving on to the bow. This was the cheapest orange fabric I could find on Amazon, which was actually a tablecloth. It took me forever to get it right, but I made this template for the bow, which is 16 centimeters wide. Using a red pen, I'm tracing the design onto the fabric. This pen will strategically bleed through a bit. Cut the fabric around the tracing and then cut another piece of fabric to the same size. On the right side of the fabric, I'm using an orange pen to accentuate the red that bled through because I need a guide for where to paint the design before I sew it. I taped my fabric right sides up to draw and paint the design. I made a tiny square template and will use my orange pen to draw on the design, which I'll then paint with the same white fabric paint. This is kind of where I botched the bow because I placed the diamonds too high up, so it would have been better if I printed the ears and made a more accurate template for the bow, but you know, this still works for a DIY version. Then go in and paint on the design. This will again take a few coats. Once that is fully dried, we can sew together the bow, placing our fabric right sides together. When sewing, leave an opening at the base so that it can be stuffed. I left a generous margin when trimming the fabric because this is horrible polyester fabric and I need to press open the seams. To stuff the bow, I cut some batting to give it a bit of body. I also decided to add some Fiberfill to fluff it up a bit. To close the bases, I'm actually just using a little bit of hot glue. With something like this, always use low temperature glue and be careful not to burn yourself. We do need to make a bow center, so this piece of fabric is 4.5 by 10 centimeters, and I'm gluing and hot dog folding both sides in so that they meet in the middle. Glue this to the bottom of the bow, wrap around, and glue into place. We can finally glue the bow onto our headband. Lastly, glue on the headpiece. I'm only gluing it onto the bow and the top of the headband because the headband will open and stretch when worn. I did after this add a coat of varnish onto the headpiece to seal it and give it some gloss. And there you go, here is a fully DIY'd version of the Ahsoka Tano Disney Parks designer ears. They're beautifully hand-painted and cost nowhere near $400. I hope you enjoyed this video for this latest Disney Parks designer ears. Let me know if there's an existing set of designer ears or any of the Minnie Mouse main attraction ears you'd like to see me DIY. But thanks for watching!